Every once in a while, we would get a superstar in there that said, you know what, this is an up-and-coming company. I think I can learn a lot of cool things and do really well. We got a 4.0 MBA student for $27,500 one year.
Yeah.
She stayed for only a year, but and she's probably making six figures at this point.
Right, yeah.
But she got plenty out of the experience. We got plenty out of the experience. She helped level us up in a lot of areas.
Scratch Entrepreneur. True stories of remarkable people who dropped everything to turn an idea into a healthy, profitable business. As business owners, it's important to have heroes, to have other entrepreneurs who've built businesses that we look up to, who've succeeded in the fields that we work in or at the things we're trying to achieve. It's important for us to have something to look up to so that we know what direction we're trying to head. Most business schools or online business courses or whatever you want to talk about ask you to find those heroes, to find those people, those businesses that have made it, maybe in your field, maybe in a different field, but in the way that you want to make it, and look at the successes they've had, break down the work they've done, and decide what parts of that you're going to emulate. There's a book by Austin Klein called Steal Like an Artist, and this conversation kind of makes me think about that. He talks in the book about how everyone steals at some level from the people who came before them. And of course, steal has a negative connotation, but he brings it to the positive where it's really we're looking at the work that happened before us and becoming inspired by that work. Understanding from what people have done before what we can do moving forward. If we're truly stealing, then that's problematic, right? But if we're taking ideas from the people who've done it before us and then turning it into our own successes, our own progress, our own movement towards the things that we aspire to, then that's exactly what we should be doing. My guest today is one of my personal heroes, the business owners that I looked up to when I started Shine and said, boy, if we could build a business like that, if we could build a business like Hanapin Marketing, that would be success. And I've watched how he's done that in the past. And this interview today really asks him to break down, even specifically, I asked him 5 specific things that he did at Hanapin or does at Hanapin to build a healthy, profitable business. Our guest today is Pat East. He's the founder of Hanapin Marketing. It's based out of Bloomington, Indiana, and also the director of the Dimension Mill, an incubator and co-working space here in Bloomington, Indiana. It's actually where this podcast is now recorded from. We've talked about it in previous shows that we have the studio here in the mill. And Pat is the director of the mill. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. We dug deep and it was really exciting. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Pat East. Pat, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. So we always start off with a quick fire. I'm going to ask you just a few different things that are going on in your world. And if you just have a one-word answer, maybe we talk about it a little bit, maybe we don't. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right.
Shoot.
So what's a podcast that you're into right now?
Actually, it's been a little while since I've listened to a podcast, but the last one I really got into was the Tim Ferris show.
Okay, cool. Loved it. He's the 4-hour work week. Which does get into you a little bit and kind of some of the questions I'm going to have, because I think that with Hanapin, you know, you've grown a business into a place where I don't know if it's 4-hour work week, but certainly you have a business that runs even when you're not there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's very fair. We've got 75 folks. We're a digital marketing agency that specializes in pay-per-click advertising. I've got a president and department heads who run everything for me on a day-to-day basis, and I check in maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks if it's super busy. I'm pretty heavily involved in the planning and strategy and budgeting at the end of the year, so we're actually just about to wrap that up for 2019. yeah, I don't have to spend much time there. They do a good job kind of managing and maintaining everything and hitting goals and maintaining a profitable business, which we'll talk about. They just think about the business in the right way, and it's in real good hands with them.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to come back to that when we get out of the quick fire. So how about a book that you're reading right now?
The book that I'm reading right now, I think one of my favorite books of all time is Breakthrough Strategy. So it's a business book like Good to Great, but for smaller companies.
Okay, cool. And it just is kind of helping you walk through the process of how to build your company, or is it more like a mentality thing?
A little bit of both. It definitely talks about how to build a business and how to, when you're not in the good to great phase, when you're like a big Walmart type of company, how you get to be a bigger company. And there's just a different set of skills and tactics and strategies they use at that stage. And so it does a good job walking through all that.
Okay, cool. Your tech stack, I don't know if this is at the mill or at Hanapin, but what's a key piece of your tech stack that maybe our listeners haven't heard of?
I think a lot of people have heard of this, but I use it as much as possible. So it's the dictation feature on the iPhone. So I use that all the time to send text, to write notes, to write blog posts, to write emails. Sometimes that helps to talk things out, even if you're not sure of what to write. Sometimes that kind of gets you in the right mindset, and then you can have something to edit with. So that helps me a lot.
So you say Siri or whatever, and then you talk in if it's an email or something. So you do that first, and then you go in and kind of look at it and edit it from there. Is that your kind of mode of operation?
Yep, you got it. So a lot of the stuff I do is on the Notes app. So I'll just bring up a new note, and I'll hit the microphone in the corner, and then I'll just start talking into it, and then. It's not a perfect dictation, but it's good enough that it gets me 90% of the way there, and then I just edit it down. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it saves a lot of time and helps me get started on some things that, if I've got a spare minute here and there, sometimes it helps.
Dictate it.
Yep.
I am not a fast typer, and yet I haven't got into the dictation side of things, so maybe I need to do that more.
Yeah, it's once I started doing it, it takes a little while to get into the habit, but once you start doing it, you'll wonder how you didn't do it all the time before.
Yeah. All right, last one, a planning tool that you use.
I think the planning tool that I use, I don't know if you call it a tool, but it's really kind of the mindset I use. And it's more about, what do I want to get out of something? For example, at Hanapin, we're going through the budgeting process and planning process, finalizing that. And we're looking at one of our conferences that, because it's in the UK and not, there's currency exchange issues.
Sure.
So it's profitable, but not as profitable as we'd like. And so kind of the process we're going through, at least I'm going through, of thinking about it is, okay, what do I really want to get out of this? Do I just want to hit a certain percentage EBITDA, or is there something bigger, and that's kind of driving some of the planning? So it's more of a mindset, I guess, than an actual tool.
Okay, yeah, but you have a planning mindset where whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a conference or whether it's a new campaign or just the central work that you do with a business, there's some kind of structure that it's like, all right.
Yep.
And you said EBITDA.
EBITDA.
Maybe I'm exposing myself for not knowing.
No.
What does that mean?
So EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Yeah.
So,
right. Okay. I did. Yeah.
So basically, it's profit before taxes. That's the easiest way to think about it.
I've been studying QuickBooks, so I'm 5 years into being a business owner, and still struggle a lot with. Not with like profit and loss or anything like that, some of the basic reports that you find in QuickBook or whatnot, but some of, especially like where taxes go and how that fits into your bottom line. And like, you think you made a certain amount of profit, but then you remember that you had to pay 20% taxes so that's what you're getting at there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talk about that a lot at Hanapin, because the bottom line is real important for us. We don't have any investors. It's real important that we're sustainable, that we're growing in a very smart, deliberate way. We're 15 years old, and so we want to make sure that we're going to be around for a long time. So paying attention to that bottom line and making sure that we've got a nice long runway is important.
Cool. I want to dig into Hanapin a little bit, but let's start at the beginning. So in 2003, you started a small marketing business. Where were you at that point and what was going on?
So probably the quarter version of the tour in terms of kind of the backstory of Hanapin was I was working for a company here in Bloomington called Author Solutions. I started in 2000, left in 2004. We went from 40 employees to 200 employees, 6 million to 20 million in 4 years. It was a lot of fun growing that fast.
Yeah.
At the time, and I think they still are, they're the world's largest self-publisher of books.
Okay.
Right after I left, they bought their two largest U.S. competitors and their largest Canadian competitor. They were the only one out of that group that was self-funded. So the others were backed by Random House and Barnes and Noble. It was a pretty tough environment, but it was really, really fun. They had sold the business, and I got some new bosses, and it was less entrepreneurial than what it was when I first started. Yeah. They wanted to put in a lot of process and systems, which is fine. It just wasn't the type of company I wanted to be in. I was more kind of shoot from the hip versus, okay, let's protect and maintain what we have.
Yeah, you were like a growth phase. It sounds like you were there
Absolutely.
Like at growth phase where they were just like doubling or tripling over the course of a year. And then when they got to sort of stability phase, I don't even know if that's the right word, but then it became less fun, maybe more corporate.
Yeah, but it did become more corporate. I understand exactly why they did it. Yeah. I mean, if I'm buying that big of a company, I'm probably going to want a lot of protections in place to secure my investment, but it really just wasn't the right type of environment for me. So kind of the driving factors besides that were I really wanted to be happy. So I had a boss that was maybe micromanaging me just a little more than I would have preferred. Let's just say that.
I mean, being happy is so important. And then when you switch it around to being the owner or being the boss and making the decisions as to how you handle the employee environment, what's maybe one thing he was doing that you would not do at Hanapin even today?
This really doesn't get into the micromanaging aspect, but I would travel on the weekends for book conferences. And, at Hanapin, if you work on a weekend and you're traveling, then you get to take that same commensurate time off during the week.
Seems reasonable.
So I just had to go back to work at Author. At Author Solutions.
So a simple example of just making sure that there's a fairness in the way that things work. If you have to work on a weekend, then we're going to make sure that you get that same break that you would have had before. Things just reasonable ideas about employment.
Yep. And at the time, kind of the way I justified it to myself was, okay, I get to go to cool cities like Chicago or Miami, and I get to do all this cool work and get all this responsibility. And that was kind of the trade-off that I made in my head that, okay, it's okay for me to work for 12 days straight.
Right, like all the time.
In some cases. But I think now, it's just not what I would do. It worked for them, but it's just not how I would run things.
So you decided it wasn't for you anymore, and you decided to go out on your own, is what I'm assuming, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right around the time I started Hanapin, Google was getting ready to launch their IPO on NASDAQ, and everybody was talking about their IPO. So it didn't matter whether you turned on the TV, the radio, picked up a newspaper, everybody was talking about it. And I thought, okay, if I don't figure out a way to ride this wave, I'm going to really regret it. And so I started looking at what we were doing at Author Solutions and my skill set, and we had really built a business on a couple of key marketing tools. One was email, and one was pay-per-click advertising. Yeah. And so of the two, I looked at pay-per-click because I was pretty good at it and felt like that was the best way to ride the Google wave. Called 5 of my would-be competitors, and to their credit, every single one of them picked up the phone. But the thing that most as a potential competitor that I liked was not a single one of them got my email. Nobody asked what my name was. As soon as I hung up the phone, that was it. There was no way for them to contact me back. And so I thought that if I could just be really sharp about sales and marketing, we could probably have a good company. And so not shortly after that is when I started Hanapin.
So the pay-per-click was how you wanted to ride the Google wave. And when we say pay-per-click, we're talking about as someone surfs the web in Google or whatnot, there are kind of like banner ads at the top, or sometimes they're in different parts of the page, but they're presented to you in all sorts of different environments as you navigate an internet browser where you can click and then move into whatever the product process is that they want to, the funnel that they want to take you down, right?
Yep, exactly. When you do a search on Google or or Bing, or you're on Twitter or on Facebook, the ads that you see generally at the top and on the right-hand side, if you're in a search engine, those are the ads we manage for our clients, and making sure the right message hits the right person at the right time for the right price.
Okay, cool. And so you started at that point and then grew over the course of time to work with Home Depot, the Weather Channel, to work with NPR, other huge businesses doing this work for them. So I just obviously did a quick fast forward in the process, but over the course of 15 years, you've grown now a business that has 70, 75 employees and works with some of the biggest brand names in the world, still focused specifically on pay-per-click?
Yes, absolutely. So we only do pay-per-click. That's how the business started. As clients were asking for other things that were tangential to pay-per-click, like SEO and web development, we started adding those. What we figured out, though, was that we weren't nearly as good at those things as we were pay-per-click. So it was really more opportunistic. Hey, we've got somebody that wants to do web development, and I knew somebody that could help us, and so we kind of cobbled some things together. But what we figured out was, over the 2 or 3 years of offering those services, the growth curve was up and to the right, and then down and to the right, up and to the right, down to the right. But for pay-per-click, it was still up and to the right. And so after 2 or 3 years of trying to do all three, we really doubled down on pay-per-click.
So my key word for 2019 is focus. And I almost cringe saying it because I love different ideas. I love having a new idea and doing a different thing. And I think as a result, my brand can be muddied. There's just a lot of different things going on. For 15 years now, you've stayed steady with one. I mean, you said you've had some little offshoots, but one specific thing down the central road, and that's pay-per-click. Were there times where that was tested?
Yeah, for sure. So we compete against agencies that are much larger than us. We compete for Fortune 500 companies, and a lot of times those companies are looking for somebody where they have one main point of contact, and they offer a lot of traditional agency services like website design or radio or TV or really a lot of stuff besides quite literally just pay-per-click. And so we have to make the case to those clients that, if they're spending millions of dollars a year on pay-per-click, you really want a specialist for that. If you've got a heart problem, you're going to go to a cardiologist. You're not going to try to save money by going to a general practitioner. And so that's the pitch we make. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And in the cases where it doesn't, sometimes those folks come back to us. But a lot of times they're much happier with somebody that can do everything okay versus one person that can do it really, really well. And so we've just decided to make that trade-off over time.
Yeah.
And that's okay for us.
For someone who's trying to decide between being a generalist in their industry and being very specific in a niche in their industry, do you have any bits of advice from your experience?
Maybe I can tell a couple anecdotes about how we decided to really focus on pay-per-click. When we first started our blog called PPC Hero, we started that almost 10 years ago, or maybe it's 11 years now. It's been a while. So we write basically one blog post a day and have for about the past decade. And at the time we started it, there was only one other blog about pay-per-click, and it was a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I thought, hey, this is nuts that nobody's talking about this more. And so we really wanted to have a louder voice. And so even though pay-per-click is a very narrow subject or kind of narrow marketing focus, like it's a multi-billion, like it's a 20 or $30 billion industry by itself, like it's still pretty big. And so there's different things within pay-per-click that we can focus on, like we do paid social, paid search, mobile, display, programmatic. We have a conference that we run in the US, a conference in the UK. So there's more things besides just kind of making sure that somebody clicks on an ad and goes to a landing page.
Yeah, but as far as picking the niche, what I heard there was, one, pick a big niche, pick a niche that has plenty in it, there's plenty to do in the pay-per-click world. And then two, find the variety inside of it, because that's fine. But I think that most advice is find a niche and, that's going to do well for you. And you've certainly made that true in your experience as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so now we're here. You've grown a healthy, profitable business. And in the next part of our conversation, we're going to talk specifically about your 5 steps to building a healthy, profitable business. But because you're in the position where you've got a healthy, profitable business, you've been able to dive into other things that are not connected with Hanapin. And
Absolutely.
One of them is the mill. Can you tell us just a little bit about what the vision is behind starting this particular startup, not-for-profit?
It is a non-for-profit. So it's a 501c3. So people that donate money to us get a tax donation, or it's tax deductible. Well, we opened doors about 2 months ago, November 1st. We've been working on the project for about the last year or so. The mill is 19,000 square feet of co-working and incubator space. Our mission is to launch and accelerate high potential companies. We know that if we do that, that's where most of the job growth comes from. A vast majority, something like 99% of job growth over the last decade in the United States has come from companies with 5 people or less. So we really want to focus on that. Our vision ultimately is to become the center of entrepreneurship and co-working in Indiana.
Yeah.
And so we know that if we encourage entrepreneurship and we encourage more co-working, because co-working actually has a lot of these same characteristics as startups where you bring in capital from outside your community. A lot of people that work in co-working are remote workers. And so you got people working in the Midwest that are making East Coast or West Coast salaries. They pull that money into our community that we can then use to grow.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of similarities between the two. So we really want to focus on startups, entrepreneurship, and co-working.
Okay, cool. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to really get specific, and we're going to say 5 steps to how to build a healthy, profitable business. You've got some ideas about how to do that. You also obviously have some experience in doing that yourself. So we'll do that when we get back.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. Scratch Entrepreneur is brought to you by Shine Insurance. At Shine, our goal is simple: to change the way you feel about insurance. Start that evolution today at shineinsurance.com. All right, we are here with Pat East, the CEO of Hanapin Marketing and the director of the Dimension Mill. Is it the mill? Is it the Dimension Mill?
It's actually both. So it's Dimension Mill Inc. The reason we call it Dimension Mill is because we're in a 103-year-old building, and that was what it was originally called, where they milled all the furniture here to the right dimensions, roughly the right dimensions, and they shipped them off to another building where they would actually turn the wood into furniture. And we call it the mill for short because the legal name is Dimension Mill Inc. and the colloquial name is the mill. Sometimes people use either or both. You'll probably hear me say both. At some point.
Cool. Yeah, I love the story. The Showers Brothers furniture factory is a huge part of Bloomington, Indiana. And the fact that we're sitting in one little element of it, the place where they cut the wood down from what was kilned next door, what was dry kiln, I'm not sure the exact words, but
you got it.
Was brought over, and then cut into even like 1/4-inch thick pieces in some cases, and then shipped over to the other building, which has also been beautifully renovated and is now our city hall and a couple of other things where they actually made the furniture. And so you get the feeling in this space of not only the history, the brick, the interesting structure of the building, but then the renovation really creates this modern kind of feel, which aligns with incubators and tech and startups in a really beautiful, wonderful way. So, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of symbolism in us creating an incubator to start new companies in literally the same building where there was an innovation-driven business here in Bloomington that helped change the landscape of Bloomington. And a lot of folks might not think that a furniture business is innovation-driven. At the time, though, it was because the Shower Brothers were the ones that invented laminate veneer. And so they were able to make furniture available to the masses. Up to 60% of the consumer furniture in the United States was manufactured by them at one point. Some of their stuff was in the White House. Some of their stuff is in the Smithsonian. So they had quite literally a nationwide reach right here in Bloomington because they had this really innovative technique in making furniture.
Cool. All right. If someone is starting a business, they're wanting to grow it, or maybe they're just wanting to grow their business more. Maybe they've been in business for 10, 20 years, whatever it is. What are the 5 steps that you think are necessary for building a healthy, profitable business?
So let me just kind of list all these and then we can kind of dive into them.
Okay, cool.
So at a real high level, the first one's unit economics. Second one is value clarity equals pricing strength.
Okay.
Third one is determining your vision and values. Fourth one is be patient for growth and impatient for profits. Fifth one is budget optimize, then skill optimize. And I have a bonus. Say yes until you can say no.
Good.
I could have narrowed down to
bonus
just 5.
Cool. All right. So let's start with number 1, unit economics. What does that mean?
So unit economics at its base is how much does it cost to produce one of whatever you're making.
Okay.
So super simple concept, but a lot of folks don't really focus on exactly how much it costs to make one thing, particularly in a service-based business.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, folks, if you're making a product, you know exactly what it costs. Maybe you're a manufacturer to make. Sometimes you don't always include the labor it costs you or your benefits or your overhead in that. But particularly for service businesses like mine, it kind of muddies the water a little bit because sometimes you can say, well, here's this one client and I actually don't have to add any more employees to service that one client. And so my unit economics have actually improved. And that's actually not true. Your unit economics are never going to change, but your actual profitability of the business will change.
So the cost of, in a service-based industry, the cost of whatever it takes you to do the work you have to do for that particular client, and figuring that out, and that probably depends on the type of business, but do you have some sort of formula that you use to figure that out?
We look at everything from direct labor, which is the actual labor it goes into servicing a particular client. So we don't include things like sales reps or accounting or HR or anybody that's tangential that may have had a hand in it. We don't only include the actual labor working on the account. We'll take a look at the cost of the software tools that it takes to manage and maintain that client. We'll take a look at the commission of the sales reps. We try to factor everything into that.
Okay. And if you don't have to grow you don't have to hire more employees or whatever, that is not more profitable than some other unit because it still is the same amount of time and energy it takes to address that particular client.
Exactly.
That it does anyone you had before.
Exactly.
So understanding the unit economics, if you have a product, it is a little bit easier because it's a little more clear. If you have a service, it's equally important though to understand what those economics are.
Exactly. And part of the reason why it's so important to understand the unit economics is whether or not you pay attention to your financials or not, they still matter, right? Whether you have one customer or 100 customers, you have to understand the cost of servicing each of those. If you only have one customer, it matters a lot more than it does 100 customers because you don't have to be as precise when you have more customers. Actually, probably matters more in terms of profitability impact to all of your employees when you have more customers. But in terms of whether the business grows or fails, it matters a lot more when you have fewer customers.
And I think at the heart of what you're trying to figure out there too is what is profitable and what isn't profitable.
Exactly.
Right? As you start to look at it, it's like, okay, this type of client is not profitable for our business. So are we into just serving them, or do we want to be profitable, and how do we balance those things?
Exactly.
Okay.
About 5 or 6 years ago, we decided to create a small business package for our clients. So we had some clients that just had smaller budgets. Maybe they weren't companies that sold nationally. They were clients that only sold regionally, or for whatever reason, that just had smaller budgets. Prior to that, what we were doing was we were charging them enterprise level rates. And for some clients, that worked out fine. But for other clients, they would just take a look and say, oh, wow, I'm spending 1/3 of my total budget paying Hanapin. And kind of that total percentage just scared a lot of people off. And so we may keep a client for 3 months or 6 months or a year, but then once they started looking at that percentage, no matter how great the account was performing, no matter how good our employees were, it would scare off some clients. And so what we did was we took a look at, okay, what are the very base things that these clients need
Yep.
in order to generate good results? What's the minimum that our employees need to do to generate those good results for them? And we looked at those things so we could reduce pricing. And so we actually had a different package for those small business clients than we did for the enterprise level clients. And that was probably a good 20 to 30% of our business for a while.
Yeah. So you looked at the unit economics and said, okay, here's what we can do and still be profitable. And we want to help these specific folks. And so we did. And so you did. And so
Exactly.
that was how you did it.
Exactly.
Okay. That was number one. What is number two?
Number two is value clarity equals pricing strength. So I got this from a pricing consultant that we hired a handful of years ago when we were looking at pricing for our conference. So one of the things we wanted help with was really understanding how to price some of our sponsorship packages.
Yeah.
And the thing he kept on hammering over and over again was that kind of the secret to figuring out what the right price is. It's really not some magic formula. It's really more about how you communicate what the value you're creating for your customer is. Mm-hmm. And so he always kept on bringing the conversation back to value clarity equals pricing strength. And so really kind of the pricing consultant, it really was a pricing consultant. He's more of a value consultant. Like, are you, one, generating value for your customers, but two, are you articulating it in a way that they really understand?
Yeah. There's a theory that this really hits on. I don't know if you know Donald Miller, who's the StoryBrand. He's got a podcast and a book and a concept and all this, but he is all about clarity as the heart of your brand. You know, it's really about that, where the clarity of the value is where you get your growth, where you get your price, where you get everything. And I think that clarity comes with brand clarity, understanding your message, your elevator pitch, or all those kinds of things, that your story, the story of your brand, is powerful and interesting. And that's where the value is. And then I guess your point here is that that also affects your financial strength, you know?
Yep, exactly. So the more you can communicate what your value is, the higher you can have your prices, or you can have them lower and actually close a larger percentage. It's really kind of whatever model makes most sense for your business. But it all leads to just more consistent, less variable profitability. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Clarity is super important. So value clarity equals pricing strength. That's number two. What is number three?
Determining your vision and values. And so this is something that we actually started doing at Hanapin probably, maybe about halfway through the life of the business. And so, I mentioned earlier where we're doing pay-per-click, SEO, and web development. And so at the point where I decided that it was healthier for the business to strip out SEO and web development, I said, you know what, we really need to communicate what the vision of the company is going to be, that we really want to focus on pay-per-click. Here's why. Here's who we're going to be in the future when we grow up. We determined what the vision was going to be. So it took me about a year kind of working on this, kind of part-time on the side, and on weekends in coffee shops, figuring out, okay, here's the direction we want to take the company. And a vision is just ultimately who you want to be when you grow up. And so for Hanapin, what we wanted to be was a world-class PPC agency. We wanted to deliver value that was 10 times what we charge clients, and we wanted to become the employer of choice in Indiana. Along with that, we determined what our values were. So these are how we make decisions, how we hire, how we fire. We have creativity as one of our one of our values, enthusiasm. So we actually determined that fun was one of our values, but we couldn't figure out whether that.
I love it.
We couldn't figure out whether that meant we should have fun all the time. Should we be funny to our clients? And so we kind of took the creative part of our values, and one of our other values is resourcefulness. So we kind of took those together and said, okay, let's make up our own word, enthusiasm.
So the vision was like who you want to be when you grow up, and the values were kind of like how you do that, like what the culture looks like to do that.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
That makes a ton of sense.
It wasn't just determining what those things are. It's communicating those to folks on a regular basis. So we've got signs up at the office that communicate all these. We talk about them in every town hall meeting. So we have a periodic meeting where we gather everybody in the company together, talk about results and progress of the company. And so these things are, elements that get repeated on a regular basis. We interview for them. We do presentations to our potential candidates on them. So it's something that very much gets everybody on the same page and ensures that we're not really wasting time on making bad decisions because we know the direction we want to move into. So there may be other things that seem like good ideas, but don't, and they actually are good ideas, but they don't fall within our vision. So they're just things we don't do. So we don't spend a whole lot of time focusing on those things. And we, attract the right people as well. And people want to be at a company that knows what they want to be when they grow up. So our retention rate is higher because of these things. And it really leads back to a much, much healthier, profitable company.
You do an interviewing thing that we could probably have a whole conversation on interviewing, but there's one thing that I think that you all do. I don't know if you do this for every position or how you choose to do it, but it is asking an interviewee before they come in to think about how they can better the business, what they could bring that would maybe be different, maybe add to what you do. I had someone call me who was interviewing for a job with you all and talk with me for probably about a half an hour about podcasting.
Oh, cool.
And so they were interviewing for the job, and however you had presented what they were supposed to do, it cued them to come to me and talk about podcasting.
Oh, that's awesome.
To dig in and get a sense. And I walked away, I was like, that is a great interviewing strategy, because then, one, you have something to talk about in there, but then you're also seeing from a potential employee what passions they would bring to the process. So I'm not sure that's in this number 3 piece, but I just thought of it, and it's a really neat way that you guys build the culture of your business, even in your interviewing process.
Our folks in HR are, bar none, the best HR 2.0 company or 2.0 department in the state, and probably the Midwest at this point. And when I say HR 2.0, I mean not just kind of HR administration and insurance, but really like career development and developing people professionally and personally, and really kind of making sure their careers go off in the right trajectory. And so interviewing people and doing it in innovative ways is something they're really, really good at.
And you've said before that you're totally okay. At first, when an employee would come in, train with you for a year, and then like a year later move on to do something else, like it was kind of hard. But now you almost see it as a part of growth and bringing in folks, bringing them up in your system. And then if they move on to something else, that's totally just a part of the process. I think that's a powerful sign of a healthy, profitable business and team. Yeah,
it is absolutely okay that they move on and do something else. When it first started to happen, it was kind of, it stung because in the short term, you invest all this time and effort and sometimes money, not just in salary, of course. I mean, but with sending to conferences and things like that.
Yeah.
And they turn around and take all those things and maybe go work for a competitor.
Yeah.
And over time, what we figured out is that we just have to train people. Like if you don't train them, like you're going to have poor employees that don't know what they're doing. They're trying to figure things out on their own. If you're not training them on the things that you want them to know, that maybe another competitor would want to know, you're going to be the one that loses out. And we've had some folks get recruited by Google, by Microsoft, by Netflix, and those are great stories that we can tell now because they really help show the career trajectory of our folks. But at the time when it happened, those totally really stung. But now we've got a really good base of folks that if that does happen, and it still does happen. We had somebody get recruited by Google last year. It stings less. For sure.
Yeah. So the bottom line on that is just like, you still have to train. You still have to run a great business. And if a part of running a great business and building amazing employees is that some of those get taken away from you by other people, that is sort of part of being good at what you do.
That is a sign that you are training your folks, that you're finding the right folks, and that ultimately it is kind of a badge, red badge of courage that these folks at Netflix and Microsoft and Google think so much of your employees that maybe only have 3 or 4 or 5 years of experience that they want to recruit them from Indiana. Absolutely.
Hey there, quick ad for Shine Insurance. And today we're going to talk about flooding. Recently in Bloomington, Indiana, we had 5 inches of rain in one 24-hour period, there were floods all over the place and lots of basements got wet and a lot of phone calls were had. And the bottom line is, unless you have flood insurance coverage, something completely separate from your homeowner's policy or your commercial business policy, then you don't have coverage for a natural flood. And so it's a conversation definitely to have with your insurance agent. Now, it can be pretty expensive. And so a lot of times you might decide that it isn't something that you want to do. You'd rather take on the risk of having flooding in your space on your own. But having the conversation and understanding is really the heart of what it's all about. Deciding if you want coverage for flood or flooding. So just thought I'd throw that out. If you want to have a conversation with us about that topic or homeowners insurance, commercial insurance, or anything else, feel free to give us a buzz at 812-679-8779 or check us out at shineinsurance.com. Now back to the show. Okay, so what's number 4?
Number 4 is being patient for growth and impatient for profits. This is Clayton Christianson's, or one of his phrases. So really what it means is that you have to be patient for the business to grow. You have to find product market fit. You need to take a lot of time figuring out kind of what the right things are to do in your business and targeting the right customers, finding the right people to employ. So you just need to take your time with those things. Sometimes it takes a long time. You know, you mentioned our interview process earlier. That's something that we still tweak and experiment to this day, but it probably took us 5 to 10 years to get really good at it. So it wasn't something that we figured out on day one. So you just have to be patient for those things to figure out. But you shouldn't be patient for profits. You should figure out how to get to profitability as quickly as you can. Even if you have investment money, not only because you have a fiduciary duty to your investors to return capital, but because once you're profitable, that allows you to have quite literally an infinite runway. If you're making money every month, you're going to live for however long you can continue to sustain that business.
Right.
Whereas if you're unprofitable, by definition, you only have however many months left to live based upon how much cash you have in the bank and how much you're burning through. And so reaching that level of profitability and figuring out how to get there quicker and just having the mindset of, okay, I'm going to be patient to figure out product market fit, or I'm going to be patient to figure out our hiring process, but I need to be impatient to figure out how to get to profitability. That's kind of the right tension and the right mindset entrepreneurs need to have.
That makes sense. So you want your business to be profitable. Obviously, we all want that. But the tension you're talking about there, sometimes in growth, like we want to hire a new person for that position we know would be great. And sometimes that's the right decision. But that's growth. And you want to be careful as you grow. You want to be patient for growth, but you want to make sure that profitability is there as quickly as possible and it sustains the growth. And then as the profitability becomes more consistent and the profitability grows, so you're making more money, then that growth can come behind it. And that's not always how it works. Sometimes you have to take risk on growth. Are there times when taking growth risk, even if you don't have the profitability totally figured out, makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't do everything linearly and you can't wait until everything is perfect. So you can't wait for everything to be absolutely perfect and kind of, wait for the stars to align. And so for us at Hanapin, we decided to start our own conference roughly 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago at this point. And so we didn't have a ton of money in the bank, but we figured out how to do it on a shoestring budget. We did it in Indianapolis, so just an hour north of here. We hired some professionals to do it, but we tried to, we negotiated the agreement and figured out how we could save as much money on it as possible by producing a pretty good conference. And so, we didn't wait until we had a substantial amount of money in the bank. We said, okay, let's place this bet, and it's a smart bet. It's not completely risky. We could have lost money on it. We ended up not, which is great, especially for the first conference. So you can't wait for everything to be perfect, but at the same time, you can't be haphazard about it all, at all. You have to place smart strategic bets and follow them up with additional smart strategic bets.
That makes sense. It's attention. Growth and profits are attention. Pay more attention to the profits and the capacity to get profit quickly than necessarily needing to grow super fast.
You got it. Well said.
Okay. What's the fifth?
The fifth one is budget optimize, then skill optimize. And so the example I use, sometimes it resonates really well with people, and sometimes it just kind of feels icky to people. I'll say that up front.
Yeah.
Our business is completely bootstrapped. It started with $2,000. That basically bought a laptop. And so, because we're a service-based business and it's all brain power, we didn't really need any money for inventory or rent or things like that.
Yeah.
But as we were hiring employees, the tough thing about a service-based business is you have to sell and fulfill at the same time. You can't hire, especially when you're growing, you can't hire too far ahead of your need, because if those sales don't come in, you're kind of toast.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we would train all of our folks from the ground up. And put them kind of through a 10-week training program. But the thing that we did that maybe some folks aren't comfortable with was we just gave candidly lowball offers. When we had a candidate that we liked, we said, okay, we've got you plus 3 or 4 others that we'd be happy with.
Yeah.
And we optimized for budget. We said, this is the maximum amount we have to spend. And it was low, not because we wanted to lowball people, but it was low because that's the money we had.
Right.
And some people accepted them. Most people didn't. Every once in a while, we would get a superstar in there that said, you know what, this is an up-and-coming company. I think I can learn a lot of cool things and do really well. We got a 4.0 MBA student for $27,500 one year.
Yeah.
She stayed for only a year, but and she's probably making 6 figures at this point.
Right, yeah.
But she got plenty out of the experience. We got plenty out of the experience. She helped level us up in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, being 15 years in and being a profitable company, we really focus on optimizing for skill. And so we say, here's the exact skill set we need. What's market rate for that? Let's go out and find the best person that we can that's a healthy budget versus, okay, here's the little amount we have to spend. Let's find the best person within that.
So when you skill optimize, now you're saying, I want those skills. That's the main value.
Exactly.
The cost, if it's more, is a lesser, thing. I'm going to pay more to do it. So at first, when you're smaller and you're getting started, budget optimizing makes sense. And lowball offer does sound negative, but I totally get what you're saying. It's like, hey, we're an up-and-coming business. Here's the power. It kind of comes back to that value clarity, but now you're almost talking to employees, right?
Absolutely.
And you're saying, hey, here's the value that comes with us. This is what we can pay. You're in or you're not.
Yep.
A lot of people are going to say no because you can't pay at the highest level, and that just is what it is. So you start with budget optimization, but then as you grow, you get that profitability, you get that large, a little bit bigger, then you start to optimize for skill. And the obvious reason is because you're going to get a lot better work a lot more quickly out of your team and build maybe a happier team that sticks around for longer as well. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Over time, moving from budget optimization to skill optimization definitely creates a healthier, happier team. When you're optimizing for budget, you make a lot of decisions and trade-offs that maybe aren't in the great long-term interest of the company, but are good in the short term, and that's what you need to focus on in the short term. But as you have a little bit more money and have a little bit more flexibility and buffer on things, you can spend more money in certain areas where the payback is longer. And some of those things are our salaries. Right now we pay double the average wage of Bloomington. So I'm really happy that we were able to get to that point. If we started paying double the average wage of Bloomington when we first started, we would have never got to this point, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of that being patient for growth and patient for profits. There's a few of these concepts that kind of
they all come
dovetail
together. That makes sense. Okay, and then we got a sixth in here. You added a bonus.
A bonus,
and this is one I still struggle with. I think say yes and then say no. Oh, what's number 6?
The bonus is say yes until you can say no.
Okay.
And so I think every business wants to only bring on the perfect client. They only want to bring on clients that they're absolute good fits for, and that the client is a good fit for them. And when you're starting the business, you just don't have that luxury. You don't have the luxury of being able to say, I'm going to pick and choose all of my clients. And so what we've done over the years is we just said, absolutely, we'll take on this business and we'll figure out a way to make it work until we could afford to, you know what, we're going to pass on that client because it's in an industry that is morally ambiguous. Maybe we know the main contact is going to be pretty tough to deal with. Yeah. I had one client who we were about to shake hands and kind of, at the time we actually didn't have paper agreements, so everything was on a handshake agreement. So I was about to shake hands with him, and we had met kind of at a neutral location because I was in Bloomington, he was in Louisville. He says to me, you know, you're going to have a target on your back, don't you? And I was like, oh, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, we're going to have to get divorced before we get married. And so I'm going to be hard on you, super hard on you at the very beginning. You can't mess this up. I was like, well, of course I'm not going to try to mess it up, but like starting off the relationship like that was just not the way I wanted to start off.
A team idea. It was setting a hierarchy immediately. Yeah,
right. Exactly. And at the end of the day, he's the client and it's his money and he can do with it what he wants, but it's also my business. And I said, you know what, this is actually is not a good fit for me. I thought it was based on the last 2 hours, but you know, this kind of one quick turn at the end makes me think it's not. And so even though the business was just me at that point, I was in a position where I could say, okay, this is not a healthy client. I'm probably going to spend 2 or 3 times as much time on this client as anybody else. It's going to eat up profitability. I was at a point where we could bring on other clients and replace him pretty quickly.
So you knew you had other options, which is a helpful thing when you're dealing with, because saying no is hard, especially in the early stages.
Absolutely.
And I think getting good at saying no, I mean, that's another part of it. Are there some tips you have to the process of saying no?
So yeah, one thing that we did a handful of years ago was that instead of saying no to clients that were bad fits, we started putting parameters around it and saying, okay, we wouldn't be this direct to them, but internally we'd say, hey, this client isn't a good fit for us, but could we take them on for 3 months instead of a long-term engagement? Could we charge a higher price because it's going to be a more stressful engagement? Or, hey, there's going to be some more things that we have to do on this account than other accounts, and it's going to be a little trickier. Do we know that, hey, maybe they're not going to be the best, healthiest long-term client, and so maybe let's do a close-ended agreement for 60 to 90 days. And so we know going into it that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that we've had to set up a number of steps, a number of hoops that the client has to walk through, that has to step through in order to become a client. And some of that is a higher price. We know that the best clients for us are long-term clients. And so if we take on a short-term client, we got to charge more so it doesn't eat into profitability. And so once we started doing that, the team started feeling a lot better too, because they knew they weren't going to get chewed up by a client. That if they were going to have a tough client, it was only going to be for a small amount of time, and it was going to make them a better account manager.
Yeah. And I think another thing you can do if you're trying to just say no, if you know that you don't want to have that relationship, it really is the potential to refer out. And obviously that means that you think enough of that potential client that you're going to put them on to someone else that you trust or like, but that just fits better. I've found that that's the easiest and most successful way is to say, I'm not the right fit for you. Here's why, but I know exactly who is.
Yep.
Sometimes I've turned people down and they've walked away just kind of being like, thank you so much. And I was like, okay, that worked. That was perfect. And it helped everyone, right? It helped the person we're referring out to because I'm now sending their ideal client to them. It helps me because I'm not working with folks that are not my ideal client. And it helps the person because we've got them to the right person who's actually going to be a nice fit.
Yeah, and it kind of dovetails, this particular one, being able to say no or say yes until I can say no, dovetails into value clarity equals pricing strength. And so if you know who your target market is and know what value you bring and know whether you can service them or whether somebody else can service them better, you feel more at ease being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to generate the most amount of value for you. I'm going to get more value out of another client. They're going to get more value out of me. So I'm okay with sending you over to a competitor. Because ultimately, if you get really, really clear about who your target market is, you're going to have competitors, but you know that ultimately if you send somebody to somebody else, you weren't going to win them anyway, right?
Yeah.
You know that they're just not going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to go through them really quickly. So number one was unit clarity, understanding the cost to produce one of whatever it is you do, whether that's a service or a product. The next one is value clarity versus pricing strength, understanding, like being clear about the value of your product and then connecting that with the strength of your pricing. Number three is your vision and values, the heart and foundation of who you are as a business. Your vision really is the who you want to be when you grow up, and the values is kind of the culture that you're going to create around your business and the experience that not only your clients but your employees have as well. The fourth is patience for growth, but impatience for profit. So be patient with your growth, even if it feels like you want to grow faster. Put the emphasis on profit over growth and make sure that you're getting that profit. Number five, budget optimize versus skill optimize. Sometimes you got to start with, employees paying what you can pay. I guess that's the most important part. And then when you can get to a point where you have more profit, you have more cash flow, then skill optimize where you can pay a higher market rate and maybe get I don't want to say higher quality, because sometimes, those lower paid, usually younger, kind of just coming into the marketplace or the workspace are great employees. It's just a different amount of experience and knowledge in the space. And then finally, our bonus is say yes and then learn to say no. So at first, you're going to be saying yes a lot, but learn to say no. Find that ideal client and figure out how to hand off the people that aren't ideal to somebody else. Is that
You got it, man.
Fair assumption?
That was a good summary.
If folks want to find you, whether it's the Dimension Mill, the incubator and co-working space, or Hanapin, your marketing business, how can they do so?
So we're super Googleable. So just Google Pat East. Find me pretty quickly. Google Hanapin Marketing, Hanapin Marketing, or Google Dimension Mill. Yeah, any of those three, and you'll find us pretty quickly.
All right, cool. Pat, thank you so much for talking with us on Scratch Entrepreneur.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Special thanks to Pat East for taking the time to share his story with us today. Contributors to this episode include myself, Jeremy, as the host. Music is by my good buddy Mark Vinten. The audio editing is by Christopher Lang, and the copy editing is by Talia Chakraborty. If you enjoy this podcast, there's a couple of things you need to do right now. First, subscribe to Scratch Entrepreneur on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, please review the show. Your rating and reviews really do matter. Finally, please join the conversation on Facebook with the Scratch Entrepreneur group, where we talk about all things business ownership. Until the next time, we truly appreciate you listening.
Every once in a while, we would get a superstar in there that said, you know what, this is an up-and-coming company. I think I can learn a lot of cool things and do really well. We got a 4.0 MBA student for $27,500 one year.
Yeah.
She stayed for only a year, but and she's probably making six figures at this point.
Right, yeah.
But she got plenty out of the experience. We got plenty out of the experience. She helped level us up in a lot of areas.